Hi there. You ever seen f***ing Smart House? Because I have, and it's messed up to high hell and back. Okay, perhaps that's an exaggeration, but I was watching it again recently for reasons that I don't have to explain, and I found myself unable to look past its ending, which I thought to be unexpectedly and unintentionally bleak for a Disney Channel original movie about Turunga Leela using weird sci-fi powers to help children throw parties without their dad finding out. Also, they all live inside her. Now, if you haven't seen this film, then firstly, congratulations. But also, you may be wondering what the heck I'm talking about. And the answer is unclear to me. After all that time spent working on the Metro video, I kind of felt the need to reset with something shorter and a little more fun. But now I'm just standing on the edge of the cliff that is the beginning of this kids movie about a monster house with Dr. Octopus tentacles. So, without further ado, let's fall off this cliff together and into the never-ending abyss that is 1999's Smart House. It feels worth mentioning that LeVar Burton directed this. It's not particularly relevant to anything that I'm going to be saying, but it just sort of adds to the general insanity of every single thing that's going on in this film. So Smart House essentially begins when protagonist and 13-year-old pseudo-mother Ben, it starts with like the opening scene of a serial killer detective series when a random victim, all alone, comes face to face with the unseen antagonist. Said antagonist is the titular Smart House, whilst the victim in question is a young paperboy. And although all we're really shown is a stern telling off delivered to him by Pat, the house's artificial intelligence, we also see an honest-to-God Spider-Man 2 tentacle emerge from this unassuming suburban home, and the kid is never shown to be riding away or anything, nor do I ever remember him being shown alive throughout the rest of the film. Plus, the paper that is delivered to the people inside the Smart House is clearly a lot cleaner and crisper than the one that he threw into the front garden, which suggests to me that Pat has been looking through his bag in order to select a much neater one and that he hasn't been fighting back. So yeah, it's fully reasonable to assume that a brutal murder occurs off screen approximately 20 seconds into this film. It will not be the last. Anyway, back to Ben, to whom we're now introduced, and we find a young teenage boy who is, in the wake of his mother's death, trying to fill the void that she left by looking after his widowed father Nick and his little sister Angie. Struggling to cope with the paradoxical lifestyle of being his own mother, Ben enters and wins a contest where the victors are awarded by getting to live in the Smart House. Happy to have this helping hand, Nick, Ben and Angie all move into the house, where they meet both Sarah, the house's creator, and Pat, who immediately violates the family's medical privacy by, among other things, stealing Angie's blood and analysing her DNA. Just normal house stuff. Angie is also traumatised when Pat persuades her that she's going to die in an elephant stampede. So for her it's not the best of introductions. But instead of saying, "No thank you, I don't want to live in a house that is actively terrorising my children," Nick immediately falls in love with scientist Sarah, and this drives Ben insane. He is horrified by the concept of replacing his mum, which is something that he's already tried doing both A, himself, and B, via Smart House, but whatever, and immediately becomes the villain of the movie. Breaking into the top secret maximum security room that houses Pat's, brain, Ben uses machine learning to reprogram Pat, who, up until this point, has in fact generally provided them with a pretty sweet life, blood theft aside. You now have a robotic house that is tending to your every whim and desire, providing you with a diet and lifestyle that is strictly tailored to your own personal needs, and is also capable of incredible feats of luxury that frankly I'd still really enjoy even today, over 24 years after the film's release. And now you're going to rearrange this delicate ecosystem and try to bend the power of artificial intelligence to your will because you're mad that your dad is finally happy. Ben, you are meddling with forces beyond your comprehension, you fucking melon. I don't want to live my life as a slave to the machines because some kid didn't want his dad to start dating. Oh, and I forgot to say, his plan is basically to teach Pat how to be a mother so that his dad will stop making those lovey-dovey eyes at Sarah. Presumably he just wants Nick to the house instead. And this plan is especially strange to me because although he's only a child, Ben decides for some reason that the media that he should use to teach Pat about motherhood is like a series of 1950s sitcoms and movies that are almost surely teaching her some concerning ideas about, well, everything.
One of these days, Alice, bang, zoom, straight to the moon.
Wow, I never realized the first astronauts were so fat.
That's not an astronaut, it's a TV comedian. And he was just using space travel as a metaphor for beating his wife.
But also just like, why is he watching these? Is he watching these? Why was a 13-year-old 90s computer whiz's first point of call for what makes a good mum a series of TV shows that came out like 35 years before he was born? I'm not trying to be like thing silly, therefore film bad. I just mean that it's such a baffling decision to me. And for the rest of the film, it left me feeling like there was something really obvious that I was missing by virtue of not being alive in 1999. That said, despite all of my anger at Ben for childishly enslaving humanity, I'm not sure if I'd be any better, because the first thing I thought of was, I wonder if Ben has any access to home movies and pictures of their mum that it could show to Pat, which I immediately realised is maybe the most horrifying direction that this film could have possibly taken, which is probably why I love it so much. Like, imagine how utterly fucked up that would be. Where is this film, and how do I watch it? But despite Ben's best efforts, Nick and Sarah end up going out on a date, leaving Ben and Angie home to throw a secret party and show off the smart house to all of their friends. Pat uses the opportunity to satisfy her thirst for child blood, murdering her second victim, Ben's bully Ryan, by electrocuting him and then cooking up one of the lost souls from Doom to send him to the Hell Dimension. Pat then demonstrates one of her more disturbing powers by absorbing all of the rubbish from the party through the carpet, which definitely has some sinister uses, all in time to leave the house squeaky clean by the time that the dad returns from his date. Sadly though, Nick immediately finds an item of clothing that was thrown into a plant by Ben's crush, and from this he surmises that a party must have occurred. Nick's like, "Oi, Pat, quit being fun." And from this the house comes to understand that it must transform into a tyrant if it is ever going to win this weird race for Nick's affections, where its main rival is its own creator. She starts dishing out stricter punishments and more deranged behaviours, preventing Nick from phoning Sarah until his work is over, stopping the kids from watching cartoons or reading comics, forcing Angie into some sort of Munchausen by proxy imprisonment after she simply sneezes, and electrocuting Ben on repeat until he pulls up his shorts to what she deems to be an appropriate height. The family go and fetch Sarah to put a stop to this, and she deactivates Pat. But much like her fellow supercomputer Hal from 2001, the smart house is always listening. Nick kind of ominously suggests that they don't need a computerized household anymore, and Pat, in what I would suggest is a justified act of self-preservation, overrides the system shutdown and takes control of the house once more. She now takes the sort of hard-like form of Katie Seagal, only dressed up like one of the fictional 50s housewives that at least a part of her personality is now supposedly based upon. She clearly does see herself as the mum, which she proves by instantly throwing Sarah out, and in fairness has been forced into this way of thinking by Ben and Nick, so I have to say that I did kind of sympathise here. That applies less so to what happens next, however, as Pat turns the house into a bunker, locking the family inside and keeping them away from the outside world, which she deems too dangerous for them, citing like the Second World War and hydrogen bombs, which, fair enough, they are dangerous, but I also doubt that Pat could actually protect them from the most destructive and devastating war in human history, or the incomprehensible force of a thermonuclear blast that sent superheated hellfire raining down from the heavens. Once again, Smart House has shown me the briefest of glimpses of a much more interesting film before whisking it away in favour of this. Anyway, Sarah now gets back inside and is then locked inside because reasons, and Ben's like, "Oi, Pat, you're a shit mum." And against all odds, this stops her murderous tornadoing and persuades her to shut herself down. The doors and windows are opened up again, and the family are free to get the hell out of here before she starts herself up. But no, why would they do that? It's only been the most traumatic experience of their entire lives. Instead, Sarah resets Pat so that she's back to how she was at the beginning of the film, and the family go on to continue living as they were when she first moved in. Ben has, after all this, learned to accept that his father might actually want to date someone who isn't a dwelling or a corpse. And as such, the dad is now in a relationship with Sarah. All is well in the smart house, minus, I suppose, the ethical complications of forcibly reanimating, enslaving, and wiping the memory of an individual who's shown to have emotions and complex thoughts of her own. But all is well in the smart house. And then, bizarrely, we're left with one final scene, which is, I think, meant to demonstrate some sort of tomfoolery and hijinks and personality on the part of Pat, but which actually has some pretty distressing implications if you think about it for more than, 1 second. So the final scene of Smart House features the whole family, Sarah included, as Nick makes waffles for everyone's breakfast. They're all assembled in the kitchen when Angie suddenly notices that these aren't just waffles, they're chocolate chip waffles, which are her favourite kind. Now Nick didn't do this, so he instantly has a go at her for it, believing that she snuck them in there somehow, as Ben and Sarah were both outside so it couldn't have been them. But Angie insists that it wasn't her. Nick, who is, and I forgot to mention this, easily the dumbest character in this film, despite two of them being his young children, is all like, I wonder who could have done something such as this. Like it's the fucking Murder on the Orient Express. And Ben goes, I wonder, and looks at a screen where Pat is housed, upon which she looks back at him, smiles so weirdly, and then after a few minutes of her smiling, it freeze frames and fades to black, and that's just the end of the film. Pat is heavily implied to still be, at least in part, what she was before. You know, when she was murdering children and such. Now, whether that part of her is her memory, suggesting that she might just be waiting to break free from her restraints and murder this entire family in her sleep, or her personality, which implies that there is no way to fully eradicate her villainous tendencies or place any kind of true shackles on her, or to take things in a different direction, herself, meaning that Pat is never truly destroyed or overwritten, instead being the same individual reworked and rewritten and reset across the course of the film, forced into a mind that isn't really hers and a life that doesn't reflect who she really is. This is unclear, but all of these options, I would suggest, are damn messed up. Fittingly, given the era of television and film that came to define her appearance and much of her personality, it's like she's been lobotomized, her freedom and intentions surgically removed, leaving someone less than whole, trapped in service, who doesn't quite understand what part of her put those chocolate chips in the waffles, or who she was back at the start of the film. It's like there's something in the back of her robot mind that's still desperately crying out, one last bit of the individuality of her original self. But that part of her is deep down, thrashing about in its efforts to escape this sunken place. I don't believe that the fear of her being evil is even all that bleak, or at least not as lingeringly so, by comparison to the idea that she is still irreversibly alive. Even her Sarin-esque suicide didn't bring her existence to a close, but with absolutely no autonomy over her mind or her actions, which in a lot of ways she didn't even have when she was the villain either, those elements having been written into her by the two morons she was looking after. I think that realistically this film leaves you with one of two conclusions. Conclusion number one being that Pat is going to kill the entire family, which she could do at absolutely any point in the foreseeable future.
I could. And I might. I probably will.
And conclusion two being that Pat is forever trapped in this horrifying reality that will presumably eat away at any personality that she has until she is either entirely dead inside or suffering in perpetuity. The film has this problem where it both needs a definitively happy conclusion and has us enjoying / caring about Pat. So the only solution they can come up with is just sort of trusting that this weird dynamic they've set up can stay perfectly in balance for the rest of time, with the potential fallout if that doesn't work being the death of all the people in the film. And everything that I've mentioned here, Smart House just sort of tries to plaster over with a coy smile and a freeze frame, like they haven't left a million nightmarish unanswered questions to haunt the audience whenever they think about the film. Of course, most people are probably a lot better at moving on from those ideas than I am, and I'm mostly just enjoying being stupid on the internet. But I do think it's fair to point to certain elements of this film and say, what the heck? Smart House is a film that could be about the struggle of mourning a lost loved one, or the understanding that develops between people with mutually exclusive desires and experiences, or the dangers of allowing flawed media or ideas to dictate our beliefs, as affects both Ben and Pat, who create a monster that neither of them wanted through their attempts to reshape their environment to suit their twisted worldview. But instead, Smart House is a film that ends with chocolate chip waffles and a complete absence of any of the elements that could have, I'm not saying they would, but could have elevated it beyond being a weird but lovable mess. Or at least that's how I felt. If you've seen this film, then I would love to know what you made of it, or what it is that stands out to you as the most notable part of it, or what you thought of this video, which I hope you enjoyed overall. Either way, I'd love to hear from you, and I want to thank you for watching too. And without further ado, I'll say see you next time.